War in Ukraine, tension in the Taiwan Straits, growing conflict in the Middle East, all with the backdrop of a possible Trump second term. The world feels dangerous, uncertain, with Western values under threat. Earlier this week, Israel killed the leader of Hamas and is still waiting to strike Iran. So what might we expect to happen next? And what does all of it mean for us here? I can speak now to the former chief of MI6, Sir John Sawers. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Trevor.
The Israeli Defense Force claims that the killing of Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar, was more or less an accident. He happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Do you believe that?
Yes, I do. The Israelis have not held back from quietly claiming success when they killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, when they assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader in Beirut. They don't claim it publicly, but in private, it's pretty obvious what has happened. I think with Yahya Sinwar, the pressure the Israeli Defense Forces have imposed on Hamas over the last year, I think limited his options, and he emerged above ground unusually and unexpectedly for the Israelis. So they sort of stumbled across him, but they were pretty ruthless when they did find him.
A senior American general said this week that he thought that the assassination of Sinwar was actually more important than the capture of Osama bin Laden, because Sinwar wasn't just a figurehead, he was actually operational. He was a military leader. Do you think that's right?
I'd have a slightly different take. I think that was David Petraeus who said that. I would say that the conflict with Hamas is largely contained to the occupied territories of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. With bin Laden, it was a global struggle against the West. So I don't in any way downplay the success that the Israelis have had in taking out Sinwar and reducing Hamas's capabilities. But I think it would be a stretch to say he was on a par with bin Laden. And I don't think it's in our interest to build him up to that extent either.
The big question, of course, that arises out of all of this is, does it make a ceasefire more or less likely? What do you reckon?
Well, in Gaza, I'm not sure it changes things a great deal. The Israelis feel that they've got both Hamas and Hezbollah, and to some extent Iran as well, on the back foot. They want to press home their advantage. I see that some members, the far-right members of Netanyahu's coalition, are saying that we shouldn't ease off, we should keep pressing forward. The one encouraging sign in this is that Netanyahu has himself now promoted or highlighted the situation of the hostages. I think that is now a big political goal for him, but it's very difficult for him with his present political setup to make concessions to Hamas that he wasn't prepared to make before. And Hamas will now be looking for a new leadership. I don't think it's likely that a sort of more moderate, compromising leadership is going to emerge. There's going to be a struggle between factions within Hamas, and the harder line factions are likely to emerge. And that's without mentioning the US election dynamic. I doubt if Netanyahu will want to give a success to the Biden-Harris administration just 2 weeks before the election, where he would probably prefer Donald Trump to emerge on top.
The other big player here, of course, is Iran. Thus far, they have been not quite neutral. I mean, they've obviously been active. But what do you think is going through the minds in Tehran right now?
Well, I think the Iranians were taken by surprise by the Hamas assault of 7 October last year. They had obviously built up Hamas to be able to do this sort of thing, but there was very little coordination, it seems, with Tehran. They've tried to keep out of a wider conflagration. One of the purposes of these militias like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, is to be a sort of forward defense for Iran, so that Iran doesn't have to get directly involved itself. And there's a delicate moment coming in Iran. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has been in power since 1991. That's what, 33 years. He's elderly, he's got prostate cancer. They are having to prepare for a transition. And they don't know exactly what the answer to that transition dilemma is. They don't know who's going to emerge as the new supreme leader or what the balance might be between the military and the religious elements within the regime. So if you're going to go through what is probably the most delicate and difficult process for an autocratic regime, changing leadership, you need an atmosphere of calm around you, which is why I think the Iranians, by and large, not that they haven't been entirely neutral, of course, they did launch 2 volleys of missiles, first last April, the second 3 weeks ago, against Israel. But they are doing the minimum, I think, in order to try to keep out of this, because they do not want to be embroiled in a wider conflict with Israel, which might pull in the United States.
I'm sure that you would actually know for certain what the answer to this question is in your old job, but if you had to guess, what do you think the Israelis are going to do, and more importantly, when are they going to do it?
Against Iran?
Yes.
I think there will be some response. The defence minister perhaps got ahead of himself when he implied there would be some form of intelligence operation, some form of cyber operation against Iran. The Americans have clearly been trying to restrain Israel. The Israelis might see an opportunity to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. Obviously, one of our biggest concerns has been Iran's slow but gradual process towards acquiring nuclear weapons. But in order to strike these nuclear facilities, which are deep underground, under meters of concrete, they need the weaponry that only the United States can supply. So I think what we will see is some form of cyber attack against the nuclear facilities, possibly coupled with missile strikes against military facilities, but leaving a major strike, a major kinetic strike against either nuclear or oil facilities on one side, not pursuing that route.
While I've got you here, John, let me draw on your expertise in another arena, and that's China. Foreign Secretary's there right now. What do you think his visit can hope to achieve?
Well, I think what this new government is looking for is to strike a balance. We've been talking for several years about finding areas where we can cooperate with China, where we can compete with China, and where we challenge and stand up to China. That nobody defines exactly what is in each basket. We obviously have concerns about some Chinese behaviour, the undermining of one country, two systems in Hong Kong, the intelligence challenges against the UK and human rights generally inside China. But the Labour government has set as its big goal economic growth. And you can't achieve economic growth without some engagement with the world's second biggest economy. So I think David Lammy is looking to find a balance here and looking to find a way forward. We're not going to have another golden era like George Osborne and David Cameron tried to pursue 10 or 12 years ago. That is off the table. But some form of pragmatic cooperation with China. Take electric vehicles, for example. We're very keen on pursuing an energy transition here in this country. And if we want to do that, we need more consumers to buy electric vehicles. Well, Chinese electric vehicles are much cheaper, maybe half the cost of most of the EVs on sale in the UK and European markets. Now, the United States and the European Union have both taken out tariffs against Chinese EVs. Question is, what does the UK do?
So if you were advising him briefly, you tell him to shut up about Jimmy Lai, the imprisoned dissident, and get on with some trade negotiations.
Well, I think he will. We know David Lammy. He will raise human rights issues, I'm sure. But I think he will look, as I say, to find some form of. It won't so much be trade negotiations, but he will be looking for a trade and investment arrangement with China, which feeds into the Keir Starmer government's main goal, which is to revive economic growth here in Britain. I think that'll be the underlying purpose of what David Lammy is trying to do.
One last point. Your sort of equivalent at MI5 now, said this week that we face serious threats here at home, 3/4 of them probably from Islamist extremists and a quarter from far right. Do you think that's right? And if so, what should we be doing?
Well, I'm sure Ken McCullum is right, because he wouldn't have said it if it wasn't right. So I think we are still facing a serious challenge from terrorism here, both Islamic terrorism and far-right terrorism. And we're also facing problems of being stirred up by the Russians through their organised crime networks here in the UK. The Islamic terrorism may actually get a further boost, if that's the right word, from events in the Middle East. The frustrations that we'll be seeing because of the lack of movement on the Palestinian question, because of the violence people are witnessing every day. And it could be that Hezbollah and Hamas, the new leaderships there, are focused so much on violence that they become not just terrorist organisations designated by Western countries and aimed against Israel, but they could revert back to international terrorism, including here in the UK. So I think MI5, the police, the other intelligence agencies like my former one, MI6, they need to be very much on their toes to watch out for a further rise in Islamic terrorism. I'm absolutely confident that they are exactly doing that.
Sir John Sawyers, thank you very much for your time this morning.